So today is the 4th of July, and this is actually probably the first 4th of July that I've spent in a long time completely alone. So I'm sure I've talked about them before on this channel, but for the longest time I had a core group of friends. And I guess I'll start from the very beginning. Back in like 3rd grade or something like that, I was very young, I met this guy named Alex. That's what we're calling him. And Alex was a cool dude. I don't really remember the circumstances by which we met, but, you know, we became best friends, and we were best friends for years afterwards, right? And me and Alex sort of had this group, sort of ever-shifting and ever-changing group, that formed around us, mainly around Alex, really. I was just kind of along for the ride, to be perfectly honest with you. But the group always came down to me and Alex, right? You know, we were the original two, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it. So for the most part, our little, like, nebulous shifting group basically just consisted of a bunch of people who would just hang out outside of school every now and then, right? And we'd go exploring and do some dumb shit or whatever. You know, normal, typical teenager stuff, I guess. But eventually it boiled down to a very small core elite group of friends. And that small core consisted of me, Alex, Alex's girlfriend, and Isaiah. The 4 of us were really good friends, right? But we were all kind of like these weird misfits that didn't really fit in anywhere else, so we kind of flocked to each other. And so even though we didn't really hang out as much as I'd like to have hung out with them, I could at least get them together for events like this, you know, events like the 4th of July. So I never really had to spend the 4th of July or New Year's on my own, because I had them to hang out with. But of course, all good things must come to an end. Our group started fizzling out after Isaiah left. Now, the story of Isaiah is, he came from a not very pleasant home, I suppose. I'm not gonna go into the details of what was going on with Isaiah's life, but essentially he tripped on LSD once, which I find to be quite interesting, because it opened his eyes up to this whole new world of psychedelics, right? And he became this really spiritual person, became really obsessed with doing psychedelics and, like, opening up his third eye and all this shit. And the reason that that's interesting to me is because that actually coincided with me doing research on, you know, psilocybin and LSD specifically, on, specifically to, help combat my social anxiety. But of course, you know, my experience has never opened my third eye or anything like that. I never really got any profound, life-changing moments from my experiences like Isaiah did. But one way or another, Isaiah kind of kind of went off the deep end, actually. So I guess this enhanced clarification from his trip, or trips, made him decide that he doesn't want to be here anymore, right? So he basically packed his shit up and moved away. He moved away. And, like, we would still keep in contact with him, but if you notice what I said earlier, our group consisted of 4 people. One of them was a couple. Usually that wouldn't be a problem because I had Isaiah, right? So, like, when they were off doing, like, couple shit or whatever, it's like, it doesn't feel like I'm a third wheel because I still got Isaiah next to me, right? But with him gone, there was nothing protecting me from being a third wheel anymore. And so that's kind of what started the decline of our friendship. But we actually still held strong for quite a while, like a surprisingly long time. Because the issue with this sort of, with being a third wheel in this case, is that Alex and Megan will obviously have a much stronger connection with each other than either of them do with me. Right? I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it, the way I've phrased that? So I was caught in this weird place where, like, you know, they're obviously my best friends, but they don't really see me as equal to them, right? But for a while we still held strong, and, you know, we even visited Isaiah a couple of times whenever we had the opportunity, but at some point Isaiah kind of came up out of the blue, and what he essentially told us was that he was cutting us off because I suppose we're not conducive to his new lifestyle, because at this point he's essentially trying to become a monk, right? Like, he never said that outright, but that's essentially what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to, like, reach enlightenment. And I guess we're not really helping him towards that goal, so he's kind of cutting off everything that's unnecessary. And so after a little bit of argument, he eventually vanishes, and we don't talk to him again. And so me and the couple, wind up hanging out less and less. And eventually something happens, right? Somebody that Alex knows, his neighbor actually, decides that they're going to move into a different place. But their lease is still open on their house. So by the time that they moved out of their house, their lease was still going, and nobody was doing anything with the house. It was just like an empty house. Still had like air conditioning and everything going with it though. And so with the dawn of this new hangout spot, we wound up attracting or enticing a certain crowd, like people who we weren't unfamiliar with. These were people who I've hung out with before, like in the past, but like they were never really part of like our core group. But having a nice little empty abandoned house where they can go to a party and smoke weed and drink alcohol and do all that dumb shit was too enticing for like this crowd of dumbass teenagers, right? So of course they're all gonna flock together and hang out in this house. And so obviously I'm not really much of a party person, not to mention that I didn't really vibe with the crowd to begin with. Just because my friends, my core group of friends, were the only people who I was able to be open with. Like, I wasn't really able to talk to them like I talk to you guys, like I talk to my channel, but I was able to open up with them to quite an extent and I was pretty comfortable around them, right? And that's incredibly rare and is the result of us being friends for so many years. But now that these new people have entered in the equation, the only way that I'm actually able to meaningfully interact with them is with alcohol. And even then, even while I'm drunk, I still don't fit in with that crowd. They're just fundamentally different than I am. But I didn't realize that was going to be an issue, because for a while I just thought, well, maybe I don't really get along with them all that well. It doesn't really matter. I still have Alex and Megan, right? Right? No, I don't actually, because what wound up happening is that they formed a new core group, right? And so our core group that was originally me, Alex, and Megan became a group of like 12 people, right? And they all became best friends with each other. Obviously me not included. Now, I just want to say before I continue with this story, me and Megan didn't exactly see eye to eye a lot of the time. Just because Megan was like, she was selectively a hyper bitch. It's kind of hard to explain. But she would do things that nobody else would call them out on, because obviously Dear Boyfriend isn't going to do it. And Isaiah didn't really care enough, I guess, while he was around. And it wasn't really until Isaiah left that these behaviors became, pretty much unbearable. But she would do things that would, like, really piss me off. So, like, for example, she was incredibly flaky. Like, sometimes we would plan an event, and I would like clear my schedule for it, and then the time of the event would come, and I've heard nothing from Alex or Megan, and then an hour passes, I still haven't heard anything from them, and I've just wasted my entire day waiting on these guys, waiting on Megan specifically, really. Only to find out like 5 hours later, she would text in the group chat like, sorry guys, I overslept. Like, oh my god, fuck you. But for the most part, I was usually able to forgive her. But she had been sort of exhibiting these behaviors a lot more often, more recently. Not to mention that our group kind of the foundation that it was built on was that each of us had something unique to offer to the group. And so what Megan had to offer was her, I guess, like, female empathy or whatever. I don't really know how to describe it, but obviously having that emotional component of a group dynamic is incredibly useful to its or incredibly healthy to its existence, I suppose. I don't really know if that makes any sense, but having that empathetic factor made it so that our group was that much closer with each other. But over time, she became less empathetic and less, receptive to our feelings, and, cared about us less. And I don't really know how to describe this without going into great detail about a bunch of stories. But essentially she turned into like this unapologetic turbo bitch, right? Because anytime you would try to call her out on her shitty behavior, she would always double down on it. And so this eventually came to a head this year, actually, where I hadn't seen them in a while because obviously they've been hanging out with their stoner friends. And I had finally managed to convince them, hey, let's go out to eat, right? Let's go do something. I haven't seen you guys in a while. I'm feeling kind of lonely over here. I just want to hang out with somebody, right? And so they get here, and they bring along, sorry, specifically Megan. Megan brings along somebody who is one of her friends, and is somebody who she knows I don't like. I don't really like this person at all. Their presence makes me uncomfortable. I don't like the way they talk. I don't like the way they act. And I just don't like being around them, right? And she knows this. And yet, for some reason, she decided it would be okay to bring her and not tell me about it. And so this kind of fucked me up because, like, I was having a really bad day that day, right? And I was really looking forward to just hanging out with my friends because I don't have an opportunity to talk to people in like day to day life. And now that you've brought this person who I don't like, it just ruined my night. I don't know. And so afterwards, I let her know because I obviously want to be transparent. I was like, hey, I don't like that you brought this person here. You know that I don't like this person. At the very least, you could have given me a warning, right? Because, sometimes I understand. Her reasoning was that they were already hanging out before we got together, and it would be weird to, like, kick her out or whatever. But I wouldn't have minded if you would just tell me, Like, if you let me know so I could prepare myself, right? But apparently the idea of that is unfathomable and unreasonable to her. And so she just sat there like taking the piss out of me, right? Just making fun of me or whatever. Basically insinuating that I'm being like an overly sensitive baby bitch. And she also brought up the fact that I never really hang out with them anymore because I'm not part of the in crowd or whatever. And she was just like hitting all the sensitive spots, right? And so I decided after that, our friendship was already like fizzling out to begin with. And after all the bullshit that I've tried arguing with Megan before on in the past, I just decided I had enough of it, and I just stopped talking to them. Right? I didn't respond to her last message, and I just kind of vanished. I just kind of disappeared. But man, I mean, it feels fucking bad, man. Right? Because that was like my last. Like, I didn't really hang out with them all that often. I usually hung out with them, like, maybe once a month or something. Just because, I mean, God knows why we didn't hang out very often. And obviously it became, we hung out less and less, ever since Isaiah left. But after that, I was actually alone. I was actually completely alone. Like, before I was fake alone, but now I'm really alone, right? And so that all happened at, like, the beginning of the year or something. And, yeah, now I'm sitting here listening to these fireworks. They've actually stopped now, but I was listening to those fireworks while doing some studying. I was just like, wow, fucking feels bad, man. I've got nobody. I'm alone now. I think the worst part about the whole ordeal was losing Alex, really, because that was my childhood friend. That was the guy who I knew for the longest time, who I'd confided in, who knows all my deepest, darkest secrets. Well, not all of them, actually. But me and Alex went through a lot together, and I really liked our friendship, though I wasn't really the best friend that I could have been to him. I seemed to be a very impatient person when it came to him for some reason, so a lot of the times I would just, like, act like an asshole towards him. And, like, I mean, I would never do it seriously, but sometimes I would find myself saying things I'm like, oh, that came across a little bit harsh, and, I just wouldn't apologize for it for some stupid fucking reason. But either way, it doesn't really matter now, I guess. One of these days I'm gonna actually be good at articulating my points, but until then you guys gotta deal with this fucking, like, schizophrenic rambling that I've got going on here. This sort of incomprehensible stream of consciousness, but hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm hoping that the end game of this channel will be that I'll be able to actually string together a coherent thought, a coherent story without, I don't fucking know. like I'll actually be able to put together a coherent thought without pausing and constant revisions and shit. But yeah, that's all I got for today. That's my those are my thoughts on 4th of July, which actually kind of dates this video, so hopefully I can get this edited and get this uploaded pretty quickly, so I don't look lazy. If you made it this far, I got a very special video coming at you next time. Hopefully I'll get it uploaded before the end of next week, I want to say. Not really gonna give any hints actually, so just stay tuned. You'll see what happens. See you guys. Take care.